Hi, I'm Tara and welcome back to another Crafting with Curly Cues video. Today I'm going to do lots of embossing and some Prismacolor coloring on craft, and I'm going to be using all kinds of adorable Lawn Fawn images. So what I'm doing is I'm starting with my Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle dies and the Lawn Fawn stitched hillside borders, and I've gone ahead and pre-cut a bunch of the pieces that I'm going to be using for this card. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take this piece of brown cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to take this wood grain backdrop stamp set from Lawn Fawn, and I'm going to emboss that on this piece of brown cardstock in some clear embossing powder. So I'm just using my Versamark ink to stamp, to ink up this wood grain backdrop, and I'm going to stamp that twice and coat it in clear embossing powder. And then you can see as that heats up, let's see, this is the Simon Says Stamp clear embossing powder, so that's been stamped twice so I can cover the whole thing. It looks really white when you put it on like this, but when you start to heat it up, it goes clear, and it just provides a really cool tone-on-tone look for the background. And this is going to be the frame to the card, so I want it to be nice and subtle. But this is embossing number 1, so you can watch as this heats up. See, it just turns clear on there, and you can see it's just nice and shiny. So now I'm grabbing another stitched rectangle die cut that is slightly smaller, and I'm going to run that through my Big Shot to create the frame. This is for the Lawnscaping Challenge right now, which is embossing, so I am just embossing all over the place. So that was embossing number 1. Here's all the images that I pre-stamped. They're from this Critters in the Forest, the trees from Happy Trails, and then this adorable guy from the Yeti Set Go. And I'm going to use that sentiment there at the bottom. And I'm turning my Yeti into a Bigfoot because I'm from the Pacific Northwest and I have never personally seen Bigfoot, but I do have a strong belief that he is out there roaming about. So I'm gonna track him down. I'm gonna nail him on this card. That's what's gonna happen. So here I'm doing some Prismacolor coloring, and that's how I'm doing all of my coloring for this card. And you can see I've stamped those large pine trees on some olive Simon Says Stamp cardstock. And then I'm just taking some green Prismacolors and I am coloring in these trees. Now all of my coloring is sped up to like really super fast so that you guys can see everything, because I wanted to leave it in the video, but I didn't want to make you sit here for 20 minutes and watch me color, which would have been actually at like 4 times because it takes me forever to color. But the theme of my Prismacolor on craft coloring, which is one of my favorite types of coloring to do because I just think that the colors stay so incredibly vibrant and just have this, they take on a life all their own when you color images on craft with Prismacolors. I don't know what it is, but they're just gorgeous. But you need lots and lots of layers. So I always start with a nice light color at the base, and then I layer on top of that, and that kind of helps all the colors that are on top of that light color keep their vibrancy. So if you were to put the bright, vibrant colors directly onto the craft, they tend to dull out a little bit. But by putting down a lighter shade first, then everything goes on top of that lighter shade, and the waxiness of these crayons, they're not crayons, colored pencils, thanks, just builds up on top of each other, and it just creates this really like solid, vivid, gorgeous image. So for all my trees, I'm just kind of doing different techniques with the greens. I'm trying to make sure that the greens are all kind of different so they don't all blend in together in my background. And I'm just, so like for these ones, I used the dark shade on the outside and then I colored it in towards the middle, but you did see that I put the light shade down first. This here, I'm just going to shade with the same color and just use different pressures to create the different shades. So another great thing about Prismacolors is that if you maybe have one of the smaller sets and you only have like 12 colors to choose from, that still gives you a lot of versatility, because depending on how hard you push with your colored pencil, you can create these different shades. So you'll see I'm using my blending pencil throughout all this coloring here, and I would say that no matter how big your Prismacolor set is, that is something that you need to invest in, is the blending pencil. It just really helps smooth everything out and, you know, make those colors blend together, as the name would imply. And so it's really just handy to have. It makes your Prismacolors stretch a lot further, and it's nice and inexpensive. I think mine came in a 2-pack, so I've got a spare. I also, you saw me sharpen a pencil at one point. I did buy the Prismacolor pencil sharpener. I was having trouble with I had a Smoky Bear pencil sharpener because I work for the Department of Forestry, but it kept breaking my Prismacolor tips. So I finally did buy the Prismacolor one, and it seems to work a lot nicer. So I don't know what is fancy about it, but it works, so I use it. So now I'm coloring that little Yeti guy, and you can see that by coloring him brown, he goes from being a Yeti in the Arctic to Bigfoot in the woods. So cute stamp set, love it. I've never used it for not Christmas time, so I'm pretty excited to discover that he vacations in the Pacific Northwest during the summertime when he's not being the Sasquatch in the winter. So very cool. The other thing I really love about Prismacolors on craft is you can use that white pencil and really make things pop. So I'm going to color the little spots on the mushrooms in the white Prismacolor pencil, and it's just going to be like, bam, white mushroom spots. And I really like the contrast. It's really cool. So this is something that I've never really done either, where I've colored all my little images on craft and then cut them out. Typically, if I am doing Prismacolor coloring on craft, look at that white. It's just like so like boom in your face white. Anyway, typically if I'm doing Prismacolor coloring on craft, I'm doing like a 1-layer card, and then the rest of my background is the craft, and you can kind of see the discrepancy between the vivid colors and then the craft cardstock. But I decided to give this a shot where I'm coloring all my images on the craft, and then I'm going to fussy cut them out. And I mean, you still get that amazing vibrant color that you get by using the craft cardstock. But I mean, obviously you can't see that it's craft once they're cut out, because I do cut them to the line. You could use the dies, and then you'd be able to see that craft. I think that would be cute too. But anyway, it was just a different way to do it that I ended up really liking. So this is my black Gelly Roll pen, and those Prismacolor pencils are so pigmented that when you color over the lines, a lot of times the black stamp line will disappear, because these pencils just give you that thick of a color coating. So I'm just going over some of these images where the black line has disappeared and using my black Gelly Roll pen to go ahead and put that black line back in. So now here's embossing number 2. I've got this whole handful of embossing folders that I'm going to use to create the background. All kinds of texture going on here. So first I'm using this folder by Doris, and I'm taking a piece of that's not Prismacolor, that's craft cardstock, and I ran it through my Big Shot and put those clouds on there. And so now I'm just taking some Simon Says Stamp white pigment ink and one of my distress tools, and very lightly going over the raised portion of this piece here, and then these little clouds are just turning white. And again, if this wasn't craft, I wouldn't be able to do that, but I really dig it. And I had to use a really light hand so that it didn't get in the background, but it's really simple to do because it's raised up. So here I'm going to color the edges of my fussy cut pieces using my Black Soot Distress Marker. Any black marker will work for this, and this is just going to give it that nice clean look to show that it's cut out. I already did all the other pieces. So now I'm the big reveal of all my embossing. So that's these are all the background pieces for my grass, and then I went ahead and embossed my trees that I had colored, and I thought that it looked really cool. I will list the names of all these embossing folders the best that I can. Some of them I don't have the names for, but at least the brands will be there over at my blog, so you can check that out if you're interested in that. So now I am gluing the stumps on these trees because I did color and cut those out separately. So I'm just going to use my Zig glue pen to stick the little stumps on those trees there. And now I'm going to spruce up my grass pieces here. So I've got some forest moss and some peeled paint distress ink. And I'm just going to use the same technique I did for the clouds, where I'm going to lightly go over the top of these embossed pieces. And then the ink is only going to get on the raised portion of the pattern. So it gives you a really great look where it's nice and differentiated from everything behind it. And it just adds a lot of texture. I really love it. I think that it makes these pieces really turn into something special. I just did another video where I did this technique, and it kind of inspired me to be like, dang, I should emboss more, like dry emboss. So, and then I saw the Lawnscaping Challenge for embossing, and I was like, man, it's a sign. I'm supposed to be doing some dry embossing and distress inking. So I went with it, and that's what we're doing. So now I'm going to go ahead and start building this scene here. So the cloud panel is the background, so it gets put directly on my card base here. And I am using just some craft cardstock, an A2 card base, and it is top folding. So here is that back panel of grass, and I used a Doris folder, and I have to be honest, I have trouble with my Doris folders getting a little intense on their cuts here. So you can see that actually ripped as I was putting my adhesive on. But because this is going in the back behind everything, you're not even going to notice. So I just stuck it on there anyway. But just a good example of like, don't give up on your crafty stuff. Just make it work. So now I've got that middle hill that I'm sticking in the middle there. And now I'm going to put my frame on. And first I'm going to stick the front layer of grass on the front of my frame. I really like to do this when I build a scene. Put the front layer kind of in front of the frame. I don't know. I think it just gives it a little extra pizzazz. So that's what I did with that. So now I'm going to see how things kind of fit. And in classic Tara fashion, I created way too many pieces. I don't know. I really thought apparently that this was going to be an extremely full forest of trees. Like I colored and cut so many pieces that I did not need. But the cool part of that is that later I'm going to post a video using the leftovers and show you how easy it is to be like, oh, I have this left over from a big card project, so I'll just throw another card together. So one thing I really like about this card and these trees is that because I used so many different stamp sets that all kind of had a different scale, I was able to create this look of like this whole landscape going back into the distance. Like that back hill is really far away, like with those little tiny trees on it. And then obviously Mr. Bigfoot and in his pine forest is right up in your face. So I think it just looks really cool how it gave not only the look of dimension to have the multiple layers, but the look of like distance. I mean, I don't know, it's epic, right? We've got distance going on. So anyway, I've got my Scotch foam tape here. I'm going to pop that frame up, and I just cut that in half to make him skinny enough to go around the frame. And now I'm just sticking the frame on the front since all those trees are on there nice and glued down. So now you can see what I mean about the distance and the scene. It makes more sense when the big trees are on. But anyway, that little log did totally not fit, but that's okay because it gets to go on my next card, so don't feel bad for it. It definitely gets a home. Now I'm just kind of figuring out how I want this little scene to go together. I definitely wanted to put some mushrooms on there so that everything wasn't just green and brown. I wanted a little bit of that red color on there, so that's the reason I was really working hard to make sure that the mushrooms fit. And then I wanted to see, like, where's Bigfoot gonna go here? Like, should he hide behind a tree? I mean, he's not a super social fellow, but ultimately I decided he needed to be like right in the front, hanging out with everybody. I also wanted to make sure that that second layer of embossing, that little polka dotted hill, showed behind him so that you could see all those different embossed layers and all the really awesome texture that it gives to this card. So I put a little bit of foam tape behind his head because he does need to pop up, but most of his body is glued to that front hill. So his little head and then his little hand has some foam tape, but everything else is just use my Zig glue pen there. So now I'm going to stick these next couple mushrooms on and just kind of complete the front panel and the look of it. And then I'm going to take, I don't know if you guys noticed, I colored a couple of little dragonflies, which in real life, I really hate dragonflies. I hate things that flutter. I don't like moths, butterflies, dragonflies, any of that stuff. But I really liked it on this card. And I like that it's up there and it's huge compared to that tree. So like it's in the foreground in front of the tree by the Bigfoot, but the tree's in the background. Just too cool. Really liked it. Anyway, so I'm taking some craft cardstock and now I'm going to take care of my sentiment, which I almost forgot because I was having so much fun building this scene. So I'm just going to stamp that in some black. I used Ranger Archival ink, but you could use whatever ink you liked. And then I'm just going to trim it down and I'm going to create a banner out of this and take some actually walnut stained distress ink off camera and just kind of distress it and then pop it up on the card and stick one more of those little dragonflies there. So that is the card for today. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. There's a close-up. You can see all that great texture you get from the heat embossing and the dry embossing. So go ahead, hit the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up. You can see all the supplies that I've listed over at my blog, curlycues.blogspot.com. I'm on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Here's another great scene building card that you can check out with some more embossing texture. And then I've also got another video here linked where I use some fabulous Lawn Fawn products. Bye.